infectious diseases, research, medicine, health. Welcome to Outbreak News Interviews. And now, broadcasting from the Outbreak News Skylar Studios in beautiful West Central Florida, here is your host, microbiologist and editor of OutbreakNewsToday.com, Robert Harriman.
Well, hey everybody, this is Robert, and welcome to Outbreak News Interviews. Now, earlier this month, the World Health Organization released some astounding preliminary information concerning measles during the first half of the year. In the first 6 months of 2019, reported measles cases are at the highest they have ever been since 2006. There have been almost 3 times as many cases reported to date this year as there was at the same time last year. So we're seeing about 350,000 cases so far this year globally. Right here at home, we have seen the greatest number of cases reported in the U.S. since 1992 and since measles was declared eliminated in 2000. And the majority of the cases are among people who were not vaccinated against measles. So joining me today to talk about measles and the MMR vaccine is the vaccine mom, Taryn Chapman. Hey, Taryn, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Robert. That's a lot of cases.
That is a lot of cases. It's really troubling.
For sure.
Okay. Well, like I said in the intro, here in the U.S. and globally, we are seeing this dramatic increase in measles, much to do with lower vaccination rates. So what I want to do is let's start with the vaccine itself, the measles, mumps, and rubella, or the MMR. It's been around in the U.S. since the 60s, and the success here has been pretty remarkable. Taryn, can you talk a little about the history of the vaccine and its success?
Sure. So we started with the standalone vaccines. We had the measles vaccine, the mumps vaccine, rubella, all in the 60s. But the vaccine was combined in the early 70s as MMR, measles, mumps, rubella. And it was released as a better vaccine in 1978 as MMR2. And now we have this vaccine called ProQuad, which combines measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella, which is the chickenpox vaccine. As far as MMR, all of these viruses that are in the vaccine have been attenuated, which means they're alive, but they are weakened enough not to infect us. So they're really, really good vaccines. Live vaccines are some of our best vaccines. We have great successes with this vaccine. Before 1963, all the kids were getting the measles. We were having around 500 deaths in the U.S. every year, 48,000 hospitalizations, 7,000 seizures, 1,000 kids left with brain damage. So this vaccine has left us with virtually, well, at this point, very little cases of measles where we're having those kind of issues.
Yeah, and we really saw measles cases decrease dramatically right here in the U.S. And in 2000, it was declared eliminated in this country.
Right.
But a strong anti-vaccine movement blossomed largely due to the debunked Wakefield study and the supposed MMR vaccine autism link. There's a lot of studies out there that have shown there is no link. Taryn, what do we know about the cause of autism? It clearly is not vaccines, so what do we know?
Well, like you said, our research has shown that there is no link. So this has been completely debunked. Wakefield has been discredited. This has just been researched exhaustively. They've been following thousands of kids for many years across many countries, and they cannot find this link between MMR and autism. What I believe is that this is kind of coincidental, and that we get a lot of vaccines before the age of 2 and right at 2, and that's kind of when the signs of autism show up. But what they're finding is that most kids are born with autism. They think there may be a genetic link, and in fact, research shows that there most likely is a genetic link because it does seem to run in families. So, one kid may have autism, and then the the siblings that come after may show signs of autism, so they do see this throughout families. Another thing they believe to be related to those neurodevelopmental disorders has to do with things that happen in utero, so maybe medicine that the mom is taking, stress, pollution, pesticides, some things that the mom's been around that may be another, what we like to call hit, that might lead to autism. So kind of in the science world, we say hits. So you have maybe environmental factors, maybe a genetic factor, all coming together that might cause a higher rate or higher likelihood of neurodevelopmental disorders.
Now, concerning the effectiveness of the MMR vaccine, if an individual has the 2 shots series of the MMR, how effective is that in preventing measles?
Well, we're finding it's 97% effective, which is amazing, but that is only if they get those 2 doses. So if they get that 1 dose, but they don't get the second dose, your children are not fully protected. And we need 95% of the population to be vaccinated in order for this to be effective in keeping measles out of the community.
And like everything else we put in our body, there are some side effects, right?
Right. Well, yes. Vaccines sometimes have side effects. However, extremely rare to have severe or allergic reactions. So, I've said this several times, I believe, on podcasts with you, but I think that, vaccine companies don't want to have a bad product. They don't want to be known for having a bad product. All of these vaccines are considered safe. If they weren't safe, they would be doing something about it. They're always researching to make sure that there's a good safety record. This vaccine, just like all of them, can cause a little pain at the injection site. I mean, that's completely normal. This is a live vaccine, so like I said, it's a super good vaccine. It's really going to cause a really good immune response. So that may mean that there might be a couple disease symptoms. So around 7 to 10 days after, you might see a fever, and that's about the time when your body's really it's at the height of making that really good immune response. So, you know what, my son, when he had the MMR vaccine at 12 months, he developed a little rash on his body. I mean, it was kind of an all-over rash. And, a little bit of a fever. That went away in a couple of days. I do hear stories of this happening, so it's not common, but it happens. So that kind of thing will go away in a couple of days. But as far as severe side effects, super rare. Less than 1 out of 1 million people who get this vaccine are going to have a severe side effect. Super serious allergic reactions, also very, very rare. Some of the side effects that would be called severe would be febrile seizures, so it's a seizure in a little child, bleeding, bruising, and then in adults and teens, sometimes some joint stiffness. So really nothing that's, super detrimental. So these are all things that, doctors can handle.
So you mentioned your child had a vaccination at 12 months. What's the childhood schedule for the MMR?
Well, around 12 months, they get their first vaccine. And then they go in and get their booster, their second vaccine, at about 18 months. But this vaccine, the MMR2, is approved for kids around 6 months if they're going to be traveling out of the country, which is important to talk to your doctor about. Should you be traveling overseas? The World Health Organization is saying right now that they're seeing 86% of kids getting the first MMR shot. 69% are getting the second MMR shot. That is not enough. That is not enough for a complete measles-free community. We need 95% of children vaccinated, all people vaccinated against the measles in order for protection. So really not good enough.
Yeah, and I think you made a very good point there as far as travel, because there's a lot of countries around here, the planet, that are experiencing large measles outbreaks, Ukraine and the Philippines and others. And if you're traveling to those areas, you got to be vaccinated, and your children, and you rightly point out that they can be vaccinated at a younger age because of that reason. Taryn, what about adults? Do adults need to be vaccinated that were vaccinated as a child? Do they need a booster?
Well, here's the thing. So if they have had measles in the past, they should have immunity, good enough immunity to be protected for life. And however, if they haven't had the 2 doses after 1968, they do need to look into, and if they haven't had the measles, look into getting those 2 doses, especially if they're around children. But I mean, just in general, just to be safe, because, adults, especially as they're getting older and older, their immune system tends to wane, and then they're more susceptible to not only getting the measles, but having severe complications from the measles. So really, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to go in if you're a little bit older and check and see if you have antibodies to the measles, and whether or not you need to just go get that shot. Or 2 shots again.
Okay. All right. Well, we've talked quite a bit about the vaccine. Let's talk about the virus and the disease itself. And it's really one of the most contagious viruses we know of, right?
It is one of the most contagious viruses. You're right. Yep. It has a 90% infection rate. That means if you have unvaccinated people standing in a room, one person has the measles and coughs, 9 out of 10 people are going to get it. I mean, that's huge. This virus can sit on the surface for up to 2 hours. That means you haven't been vaccinated. Measles is sitting on the counter next to you, and you touch it, and you touch your mouth or your nose, you can still get the disease. You think about being in an airport and you're traveling, and there's a higher incidence of measles, when you're overseas and you're getting on an airplane and you're in close quarters, you haven't been vaccinated, your chances of getting measles and you're in an airplane with somebody that has it, it's huge. And then not only are you getting it, but you're bringing it back into your country and infecting a lot of people, and that's what we're seeing right now. One of the big things is when you get the measles, a lot of the time you're not going to know that you're sick in the beginning. It's going to show up as, maybe 8 days later, a cold, and you don't even know that you have it. So you're passing it without even knowing. It's just so contagious. It's still killing people worldwide. You have 400 people a day that it's killing. That's 150,000 people a year. And a lot of those cases are going unreported. They're in countries where they're not reporting that stuff. They don't even know sometimes. A lot of these kids are under 5. This is a huge childhood illness in a lot of places still. So, and a lot of people don't have the shot that we do. But if you have measles or your child has measles, you have to isolate them. You have to contain it because this is so highly contagious.
So can you tell the audience what are the symptoms they would be looking for if they had measles? What are the symptoms of measles?
Well, you get measles, you'll start seeing symptoms of the measles at about 10 to 14 days after you're exposed. We call this time before you're seeing symptoms the incubation period. During that time, before you get that measles rash, that typical rash that we may have all heard of, you can spread that. I mean, at 8 days before you're getting the rash, so you're walking around, you don't know you have the measles, and you're touching surfaces and you're coughing, and you can be spreading that virus. I mean, it starts as cold-like symptoms. You have that little bit of a fever, runny nose, cough. You get the sore throat. One of the big things that we can kind of see is the red inflamed eyes, and that's kind of more of a typical sign of the measles. And then, the ultra-typical sign is that rash that first forms on the face and then spreads down the tummy back and then down to the legs, and you'll see fever at that point, like 104 to 105, almost 106, which is outrageous. Should be in the hospital, especially if you're a child. And you see a lot of severe complications at that point. And then finally after that, it's going to recede, and it's going to recede just the way it started, face, trunk, legs. And so, the big thing is you just don't know you have it in the beginning, and it's so darn contagious.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unfortunately, many people look at measles as a very mild disease. In cases, it is pretty mild. However, it can carry with it some very serious complications, and as you mentioned, causes thousands of deaths worldwide every year. Taryn, can you talk about some of these complications?
Well, the complications are ear infections, diarrhea, pneumonia, encephalitis, but those can lead to deafness, intellectual disabilities, and death. Death really comes from those secondary infections. Around 3 out of 1,000 have brain damage or left with significant brain damage. Pregnant women, if you're pregnant and you get the measles, your death rate is significantly higher than a woman that isn't pregnant. There's problems with the baby, preterm labor, low birth weight. So and you cannot get MMR while you're pregnant. So this is something that you need to make sure that you have before you're even thinking about it. There's immune system consequences, and down the line there are consequences. Years and years later, should you get the measles, all kinds of things down the line.
Yeah, and we're going to jump right into that. And want to learn a little bit more about subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, or SSPE. Now, this is something that many people are not aware of.
Right. This is something that you can get from having measles years down the line. Like I said, that's something that can happen. It's really rare to have this happen. Only around 4 to 11 out of 10,000 people who do get measles have this happen, but this is something to be aware of. So, should you survive the measles, you're susceptible to this swelling and inflammation of the brain, and this leads to disabling, progressive, fatal disease. You may seem healthy. You seem healthy for 7 to 10 years, maybe up to 27 years later. You come down with this SSPE. It'll show up, and it's more common if you're under 2 when you get the measles. It might show up around 10 years. They notice this because you'll have some optic nerve pain, retina damage. You'll start getting muscle twitching, motor coordination, and that's normally when they're looking at this SSPE. Sometimes they don't figure it out. Around 3 years, 1 to 3 years after you're diagnosed, they start seeing these problems leading to death. It kind of comes in stages. It starts as this jerking, spasms, seizures, dementia, blindness, and then, your body starts to go rigid. You get brain damage. You lose control of your breathing, your heart rate, blood pressure. Go into a vegetative state, and then that 95% of the time leads to death. The rest of the time, that 5%, should you live, you're probably going to be permanently brain damaged. So this is a consequence of measles. Like I said, it's rare, but it is something that's notable.
Yeah. And, of course, you run the website, thevaccinemom.com, and one of the articles I was very impressed with was the article on immune amnesia. And again, like SSPE, a topic that many people may not be aware about. So Taryn, what is immune amnesia?
Well, this is definitely interesting new research. In fact, it's not super new, but it's really not talked about, and I think a lot of people don't know about it, including medical professionals. They've found that if you get the measles virus naturally, it will knock out your immune system. So say your child should get the measles, their immune system, if they get them at 10 years old or whatever, their immune system will be knocked all the way back to the immune system of a newborn. They will have absolutely no memory to the diseases that they've had before, no memory to the vaccines that they've had before. All of those memories that their white blood cells are holding on to are gone. I mean, it's killing your blood cells, your white blood cells. So what they did is they followed kids. They followed records of kids before 1963 who had the measles, and they found out there were higher death rates of children from other diseases after they had the measles. So then they looked at children who had MMR, the vaccine, and they found that the death rates from other diseases were lower. So that's when they kind of started to form this hypothesis that there was a link between measles and a lower immune system. So then they went on to test in primates to see if what happened after they gave the primates the measles, and they found that they had lost antibody protection to other diseases they had previously been exposed to. They're finding that should a child get anybody get the measles, it takes their immune system around 28 months, but up to 3 years to regain immunity. So that's the ability to, produce antibodies to these other diseases. They have to go back and get re-vaccinated against everything that they had been vaccinated against before. So should they get the measles and they've been vaccinated against, say, tetanus or polio or whatever, they have to go back and get re-vaccinated against all of those things because they have no more memory to them. So not only does MMR protect against the measles, but it protects against other infectious diseases by leaving your immune system alone. If you don't get MMR, your kids are exposed to the measles, and on top of that, they are exposed to all other infectious diseases should they get the measles.
Well, that is just so fascinating, and I appreciated your article on that. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Now I want you to put on your vaccine mom hat. And Taryn, what would you say to parents who are hesitant about getting their children vaccinated?
Well, like I say all the time, there are so many stories out there that are so emotionally charged. I mean, really, they get to me too. I read some of these, anti-vaccine stories, vaccine injury stories, but they're really just stories. I mean, vaccine injury from MMR alone is less than 1 in a million. So you have all these stories out there. I mean, a lot of it just is plain fiction. Honestly, you got to stop Googling. You have to stop going down that rabbit hole. There's so much misinformation out there. I mean, like I said before, there's no link that they can find to autism. This is a safe and effective vaccine. No vaccine company wants to. I know that a lot of people don't trust big pharma who are, hesitant to vaccinate, but honestly, they are there to help. They want to eliminate disease. They don't want to have a bad, unsafe product out there. That would be, not smart on their part they're doing the research. They want this, they're looking to eliminate disease. If you get this vaccine, you're really protecting your child not only from measles, but from all other diseases. Should your child get the measles, they're opening up other diseases to come in, say polio, chicken pox, into the community, which are then, it's possible that those other diseases are going to infect other children, especially children who have, lowered immune systems, children, with cancer, babies, those who are unable to get vaccinated. Got to do your part and protect all children.
Okay. Any final thoughts on measles or the vaccine or anything similar to that?
Yeah. Well, this just came out that the UK has lost their measles-free status. And this is something that's trending. I mean, it's trending in the United States. We're seeing higher rates of measles, lower rates of MMR. We could be close to losing our measles-free status as well. I mean, we're seeing lots and lots of cases now. It's all over the news. This year has been particularly bad. We have the ability to eliminate the measles, and, it should be, you just gotta get your kids vaccinated. You gotta do your part. This disease is one that has nowhere else to go. It lives in humans only. There's nowhere for else. It's just like smallpox. We can eliminate it, and we have the ability. We have such an effective vaccine. I think we all just need to do our part and, think about the next generation. Think about the following generation, how we could protect our children and our grandchildren, just like we have from smallpox. I mean, the ability is there. We just got to do it.
Okay, great. And if you want to see more of Taryn's work, you can see it at thevaccinemom.com. And I want to thank you, Taryn Chapman, for joining me today to discuss this very important issue.
Thanks, Robert.